Because when we walking with God, He is real. He is security. He is sure and certain. But how we feel can be volatile. Some stuff really do not be about feelings. It's about discipline. When you walking this life, when you're in the faith, you don't always have answers to your problems, to your pains. What you have is the practice of faith. What you have is the discipline that goes behind, or that is the pulse within being a believer in Christ. I have a confession to make. I don't have all the answers. I realize that it may seem as though I do, because I come here and I give you the resources that I have used and leaned into when it comes to wrestling well. But I was asked questions this week from somebody who saw my TikToks that spoke directly to my present pain. And I realized how I'm doing this platform a disservice if I don't continue to be just as vulnerable, just as honest about what is hurting and where I have questions and where I still have pain, as I am enthusiastic about sharing the answers, sharing the responses, sharing the resources for how to wrestle well. I don't know what this video is about to be, but I feel like the Lord has told me to do something that I didn't want to do until I was on the other side of it, but it keeps coming up and I am not going to run from Him anymore. First of all, pedal strokes was created and formed in my brain, in my heart, for women who have survived heartbreak. And let's just keep it a buck. I'm sick of seeing us suffer with partners who do not honor, love, respect us, and who are not intentional about how they move with us. I think it's dishonorable to the Lord because He is love Himself, and He would never love us in the way that we tolerate projections of love from these fellas. I speak to that because I know that. I say it with such indignance now, but I've been her who stayed long enough to be abused, who stayed long enough to be assaulted, who stayed long enough to be belittled. I've been that woman thinking that love couldn't be no better. And so when I chose to surrender, when I chose to give up my desires for the Lord, and He ripped me away from a relationship that defined me for the majority of my life, that was my only dream, that was the only thing that I thought I would ever be good enough for. He changed the way that I thought. Why get involved to rescue me if there is nothing better for me? Why get involved to rescue me if there is nothing more to be experienced in this life? There's nothing more to be learned about love, and if there is no one else who will give me better. Back then I thought very basic level, like I was only thinking about being in a healthy relationship, being in a good relationship. But the work that the Lord began to do in me, it was on me. It wasn't about preparing me for love. It was about making me into the likeness of Jesus. It was about readying me for Him as His bride. With that came some hope, some expectations, a lot of breaking around my theology that led me to rest, that led me to be still, that led me to wait. And I never want to come off as if I do not remember my feelings, or I do not feel my feelings when it comes to grieving in the faith, when it comes to waiting in the faith, when it comes to wondering, asking questions, when it comes to this faith. A little while ago, I recorded a video that I wasn't able to export, and it made me question whether or not something was wrong with the content. And after many months of praying and talking to my wise counsel, I realized that it wasn't necessarily something wrong with the video, but maybe that it could be done better, because it needed to be communicated from a place of vulnerability and not as an expert. So here we go. Lately I have been wrestling with the name of God, Elroy. Some time ago I was journaling and raised the question up to Him, Lord, what brings a person to seek out idols? What feelings come up for a person who does not necessarily intend to come up with replacements for God, but they find themselves looking to other things for their satisfaction, for their comfort, for their survival. I've been guilty of it, of leaning into self-sufficiency and leaning into control and leaning into approval more than I have trusted in God, more than I have looked to the Lord. Lord, what makes people look to something, a concept, an idea, a person other than you for relationship, for the things that we feel that we need? Why don't we go to you first? And I came up with a list. Desperation is present in the place where we run to our idols. Fear is present in the place where we run to our idols. Powerlessness is present in the place where we run to our idols. Insecurity is present in the place where we run to our idols. Injustice is present in the place where we run to our idols. Heartbreak is present in the place where we run to our idols. And connected to that, we don't trust the God that we say we serve. We don't trust the God that we say we love. We run to any solution that makes more sense to us, that we can see, that we can hold, that we can cling to, that we feel that we can control, because it's easier than trusting God. One of the ways to approach this insecurity, because this is what it is to think about who is God and how does his character combat my feelings? How does the truth of who he is check my feelings? The name of God, Elroy, means he is the God who sees. We don't believe that God sees us. And when we don't believe that God sees us, it's easy to say, I'm going to go with this choice. I don't believe that the good God who creates good things has his eyes on me. I'm going to continue to tolerate the volatile behaviors of this partner because I don't believe that the good God has his eyes on me. I have prayed and I have waited and I have prayed and I have waited and I have asked and I have prayed. But this keeps popping up. It's easy and I see it and I can touch it and I can hold it. I have prayed and I have waited. I have prayed and I have waited. And the Lord hasn't delivered anything. I'm only getting silence. So I must need to go into my own strength, into my own resources, and make something happen of my situation for myself. Where there is pain, impatience, the emptiness that comes from the waiting, the grief that we feel in this faith is one of those things that would want to drive us to our idols. The next question that kind of came up was, why is it so difficult to trust God? Who trusts somebody that they don't know? And more intimately behind that, for the women who Pedal Strokes was created for, we got questions. God, where were you? God, why did this happen to me? God, how long will you hide your face? God, are you still there? God, why didn't you rescue me? God, will you rescue me now? I think that for what I want to say today, because this is a very layered conversation, what I want to testify to today is that I'm asking the same questions as a survivor of narcissistic abuse and emotional abuse, as a survivor of sexual assault, but more so as a woman who surrendered, as a woman who has tried to be still, who is aware of her old habits, of trying to make things happen, of leaning into approval and self-sufficiency and control, who is aware of whenever that desire to run to them old habits cooks up inside of her body, and instead of running to the idol, instead of being the woman that I have been before, I kneel. I've been trying to kneel, and I have prayed, and I won't say that the Lord has not responded to me, because that's not true. The Lord has responded to me. He has given me promises that he will come, that he will move, that he will spare me, that he would honor me and bless me. I have to cling to the name of God, Elroy, to keep wrestling, to keep fighting, because every day that I wait, it feels like the world becomes a greater threat to me. I want to know so badly when he will make good on his promise, that it makes my today almost impossible to stand through. I do want to talk a little bit about what has comforted me and how to wrestle with these feelings and how I've been wrestling with these feelings. One, let's look at Hagar and Sarai. We know this story. We know how Abraham was the father of many nations. He was married to Sarai. They were promised a son that they did not conceive, or that Sarah did not conceive until she was old in age. And there's a season that's reflected in Genesis 16 where Sarai is so desperate. She's feeling so much grief and so much pain. She is in suffering. And I realized, like, we sometimes highlight the story around Hagar, but the first person who was struggling to believe that God sees her, that God is Elroy, was Sarai. She knew enough to know that the Lord had closed up her womb. The Lord had made her a promise, yet the Lord had not delivered on the promise. She was looking at her circumstances, how old she was, how old Abram was, and like me, I'm sure she was just tired of waiting. And I had to sit in that for a second. If you know anything about my story, if you've been here for some time, then you know that in 2020, I confessed my fears to the Lord, doing a dangerous prayer series. And one of the prompts of that series was to confess your fears to God, knowing that where you have fear is where you trust God the least. This was the beginning of me getting to surrender. I admitted to him fears that I didn't even want to speak, that I didn't even want to say. And the Lord responded. And that terrified me. I'm not going to lie. It terrified me because he led me to face every fear that I wrote out. One of them being that I was afraid that I couldn't have children, afraid that I wouldn't be able to have children. And about maybe 6 weeks after I confessed that fear, I went to the doctor for my annual, just to, doing my womanly duty of getting checked up on, and found out that I had a fibroid. And again, we're talking about not having trust with the Lord. And so my doctor was kind of alarmed when he did my pap, and he was not able to see what he needed to see because of the size of the fibroid. He almost was like wiping his head with sweat. His whole demeanor was like stressed because of the position that I was in, and I had zero understanding for what was going on with my body. And when I began to do some research about fibroid issues and fibroid surgeries, because that's how my doctor's appointment ended, that I had to have surgery and that he wasn't going to do it because the patient just loses so much blood and he's not comfortable. He was giving me all of this, and I was like, what are you talking about? Whatever. Long story short, I survived that. God is good. But in that day and at that time, I was even more so afraid because the surgeries, whenever they are not successful or after some time has passed, do something to the womb that keeps the egg from being able to attach to the wall of the uterus, which is essentially how a woman conceives. Like, the complications from the surgery cause scarring that prevent that attachment from happening and keep people from being able to have children whenever there are complications. And I was kind of like shook because one, I had just told God that I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to have children. And now I'm having to walk through this thing at 25 years old, or that could threaten my fertility. And so years later, it's 2025. Well, it was the end of 2024 when I was first studying this. I needed to remember what it was like to be afraid that I wouldn't know my babies. That after all the pain in relationship that I had experienced, I have a desire to be a mother. I have a desire not only to be in a healthy, loving, God-honoring relationship with my partner and husband, but I have a desire to be a mother. I want to be a mother. And God has been good to me. God kept me through that season in 2020. And the Lord affirmed for me that I am well, that he will keep me. He will continue to keep me. But as I was reading, the first time that I recorded that video, I don't think I was sitting in long enough what Sarai was feeling. And I wasn't thinking about how I could empathize with the pain, that longing for a child. the longing not only just for a child, but to see the Lord move, to see the Lord respond, to see the Lord open his hand, and to see the promise in the physical. I had to feel what she felt, and I had to go back into some pain that I held, fear that I held years ago, that this might not happen for me. This thing that I want so bad, it might not happen for me. Does God see me? And from that place of her desperation, from that very pure desire to be a mother, to see God's promise, she didn't turn to God with her pain and with her insecurity. She turned to the idol of self-sufficiency. She went to her husband and said, maybe it is that the Lord will send the promised seed through my servant Hagar. So she offers up Hagar to Abram, who lays with her, gets her pregnant, and then the story transitions into a focus on Hagar at that point for me. But what we're talking about, or what I want to communicate today, is that our feelings are powerful. Our feelings are real. But our feelings are not determinants of truth. Truth is truth. The word is truth. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. Our feelings, if we don't check them, can drive us into some very dark places. I'm testifying to that today because my feelings have been trying to consume me. And the enemy is quick. The enemy is quick. He sees our pain. And when he swoops in, his attempt is to steal our faith, to get us to stop believing in God, get us to doubt that God is who he says he is, get us to doubt that there is an Elroy. Because if I don't believe that the Lord sees me, then I will always trust in something other than him. So here I am, very empathetic to Sarai's pain, but also very aware of her wrong turn. And in my life, I'm feeling my own pain. It may not be that of if I can have children today, but a little bit of it is, when am I going to have my children? When am I going to meet my husband? When am I going to have the career of my dreams? Like, when are the things that I confess to the Lord as my fears, that he led me to confront, that I went through and I dealt with, and he dealt with me. And it was necessary and it was good, because my body is under the sovereignty of God. So is my life. So is my husband's life, wherever he is in the world. So will be, and so are really my children's lives. Do I trust the sovereignty of God? Do I trust that the Lord sees me? I'm clinging to the truth with every ounce of strength that I have left. My question has been, when am I going to see the reversal? I gave up the love that I thought that was good. And really the Lord took me out of it. But it also taught me. It made me bold whenever just last year, and it's been almost a year now, I went back into unemployment because I had the audacity to speak up for myself at a toxic work environment. I was not emotionally safe. I was not learning well. I was not being taught to practice safely. And not only that, it was just a toxic environment. It was not good for my spirit. It was not good for my mind. The Lord removing me from that abusive relationship made me think, why don't I trust the Lord for my provision? I don't necessarily want to not have a job again. I don't want to necessarily not have income again. But I cannot stand for this, because the Lord's reach for me has taught me that he wants more for me. So I presented my concerns to my boss in a letter of resignation. There were some things that were going on that should have been like a support to us. And the way that I approached it with the Lord, because at first I was just praying like, Lord, what would you have me to do? It was time to make a decision. And I moved forward with the truth that I knew that he would not want me to withstand maltreatment for a check. I decided to trust him to provide for me. I put out the letter of resignation saying, Lord, if this is your will, I will leave the job. It's a 2 weeks notice. If it's not your will, if you would rather me stay here, then I pray that there be some response from those above me who can help to heal what's going on here. And I withdraw my 2 weeks notice. I have that right. And instead of that being the case, my employer asked for me not to come back to work. She told me, yeah, basically we don't need 2 weeks. You good. And so I received that as, well, okay, the Lord will provide. This was his will. This is what he wanted. I was learning and enthusiastic about trusting the sovereignty of God. But this part here, another year later, this part is hard. This is the part where me, a Christian, is starting to itch. This is the part where the suffering feels unbearable. And I beg for the Lord to respond to me. Beg for him to give me something, any sense of direction. And at one point, in one season, when I cried out to him like that, with that desperation, he came to me to hold me. And I remember that. And I wanted that. I kind of expected that. But I think that what he's asking me to do in this season is trust what he has already given me, which brings me to the second point that I was making about how to wrestle well. We have to remember the Lord. This hurts real bad, but I'm testifying to miracles of the Lord's responding to me. I am testifying to the way that he responded to me when I prayed the dangerous prayers, because he did not want us to have trust issues. He cared enough about my faith that he would make me face my fears. And then years later, we would confront my idols. And then years later, we would be in this moment, in this season, where I refuse to do anything that he didn't tell me to do. Because I don't ever want to break his heart in that way again. I love him. He loves me, and I know that. I'm pulling on my receipts to anchor me because I know that God is faithful. I've already seen him as faithful. But this hurts. Today hurts. It has been hurting. And I didn't want to get on this camera and say that to y'all while it was hurting. But I feel that this is what the Lord is asking me to do. So here I am. I just listened to a sermon Jackie Hill Perry was preaching about endurance. Actually, the Lord responded to 2 of my very desperate, dramatic prayers with sermons that Jackie had preached. One about hope and one about endurance. And honestly, they're mingled. But the one that I just listened to was talking about how we should care more about offending the Lord than we do about our own shame. Shame puts our focus on us. But in humility, if I'm looking at him, what is it that he wants me to do? And am I willing to offend him by being disobedient to honor my shame? That's one. And then 2, she made a point that I think needs to be emphasized. So I pray my testimony today does that. The way of Christianity is the way of suffering. My grandma actually had just said them words, word for word, weeks before I listened to this sermon. But the way of Christianity is the way of suffering. It comes with this faith. It would be a disservice to those who are believers, those who would want to be believers, to only have material out there that's like, this is fun and games. It's the opposite. But what's wild about the faith, the suffering is what sanctifies us. God, I just was reading this yesterday. I think this is one of the things that I was thinking about, but it's another scripture. I need to just sit on it for a second. But James chapter 1, verse 2 says, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. But I'm thinking about 1 Corinthians, I believe it was Paul speaking. I can't find the scripture. I don't know that this is the one that I was thinking about, but this one is fitting. Let me start at 7. Lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore most gladly I would rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities and reproaches and needs and persecutions and distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I think I needed that today. And the point that I'm trying to make is that now that I have gone through the suffering of one season of my character development, of my being made into the likeness of Jesus, I would never ask that the Lord had withheld that from me. I know goodness to be that he took me through, that he allowed me to be broken so that I could know him intimately. I would not really feel connected to his sovereignty outside of the suffering. This is something I was journaling the other day. But would I have known his sovereignty and felt confident in it in the way that I do now if I would not have seen him respond to my fears in the way that he did? That hurt. It hurts. And even now the waiting hurts. But had I avoided that season, would I have known that the Lord is sovereign? Would I have known that he is close to me, so much so that he can respond to my prayers like that? He will respond in the physical like that. That blew my mind. It was wonderful and terrifying. And it's something that's in my track record, and it ain't just that season. I have, y'all know, on my prayer board, the reminders, the letters that I've written of just like things that the Lord has done, ways that he has been faithful, ways that he has shown his sovereignty, things that have happened specifically to me, that I are just testimony that I read along with truth, along with my Bible, to be anchored in who he is. God is faithful. God is real. God is good. I can't argue that he is real. I've seen him. I can't argue against him being good because he's already been good to me. I don't like the waiting. And the enemy attacks me in the waiting. But God is real, and God is holy, and God is good, and he does keep his promises. And if he only giving me the promises and he not giving me direction, my itch is something that I need to surrender. My itch to do something is something that I need to surrender. It's honestly very me to need to surrender it, because it's very me to want to do something to save myself. That's how I honor my idols in my past. What am I saying? God sees us. Even you. The woman who is impatiently waiting to receive romantic and healthy love. That woman who was tempted to go back to that old thing because it was just good enough. That woman who is tempted to stay in a mediocre thing because it's just good enough, because you don't believe that the Lord will be faithful to you on the other side of your singleness. I feel you. You don't want to be single. You don't want to go through the waiting. You don't want to go through the go through. I'm testifying today to my singleness and have been so for years. But I'm going to keep waiting right here. I'm going to keep waiting for my faith and for yours, that the Lord is going to return what I thought I had lost. And not only that, he is going to affirm himself. My waiting in this season is bigger than me getting back the things that I thought that I lost. It's about seeing God as God. I know he will because he said he would. It's about me seeing him do what he said he would do. I'm going to wait for you. God sees you. The woman who wants to be a wife and a mother. God sees you. The woman who fears she's unlovable because she has too many scars. God sees you. The woman who is afraid she is running out of time to receive God's promise. The woman who is desperate right now. The woman who is hurting right now. The woman who is waiting and trying to be faithful, but she feels like she's running out of strength. Elroy sees you. He is our Father. He is our friend. And I am clinging to that, to truth, so that we would not fail, that we would not faint. Didn't I tell you, if you believe, you will see the glory of God? I believe. I believe for you. I believe for me. I know we need comfort and provision and direction and affection. I know we desire healing and acceptance and freedom. I still believe in that for us. I believe in that for you. I believe in that for me. I pray that this honesty encourages and empowers somebody to believe today. I pray you would pray with me and for me today. I think that's it. God is Elroy. He cannot change. God is Ishmael. He hears just as well as he sees. Remember him, your track record of your personal accounts, and that what he has said in his word reminds us who he is. Lean into that, cling to that, live to fight another day. I love you. Jesus, give us hope again.